working anyway right now?
The original kind of thing we were looking at for Wellgo was around preventative and trying to spot issues before they arrive. So there are lots of things that people can like start to see within kind of employment scenarios as well. So there is that tricky thing that I was talking about earlier on, people not turning their camera on and things like that. If behaviours start to change with people, you can tend to see that something is changing, is different. Companies that put in good one-to-one systems in terms of having regular conversations that aren't just all about performance, that are more about how you're doing, what's going on, can we help, all these type of things, to make sure there's a good dialogue between management and employees can really help to bring those issues out and predict what's going to happen in the business. Because if you get, a burnout in a great number of your staff, it's awful.
Right.
And you lose staff, and trying to recruit them is a huge amount of money and time and all of those kind of things. So the more you can do to kind of teach your business about spotting these problems really early on and making those adjustments. So there's an idea in UK disability law about reasonable adjustments. So say if you're physically disabled, you would put a ramp in the business so someone can kind of put their wheelchair up. You do exactly the same thing with mental health, right? So for instance, if you've got someone who's anxious, so you might have a member of staff who's anxious around the fact that they had a trauma in their childhood, so when certain things happen in the office, it might trigger them and make them feel anxious and fearful. Okay, so what do? You learn about this thing, you talk to that person, you put their seat and move them into a certain part of the office where they're not going to see that stuff, or they're going to be in a quiet space because they may sit somewhere on the autism scale, so noise is overwhelming for them. So you give them a room which is quiet to work in. So you make these adjustments in your workplace to try and help those people. And why wouldn't you do something like that?
Yeah, why wouldn't you? And I'm just wondering if, some people don't tend to really pay attention to that. So I'm wondering, can there be a questionnaire, but, I don't know corporate business that well, but I'm just trying to think, what can they do if they don't take enough time to sit and notice their employees?
There's a couple of ways of looking at it. There's one way which is surveying. So a lot of companies now are doing surveying, and they're looking at the kind of how well they're performing quality-wise. But the measures that you need to include are ones around kind of mental health and culture, as well as, are you delivering, etc. It doesn't need to just be about, their output. It needs to be the input for the business for them. So there's a lot of companies are now moving towards surveying, understanding that, and analysing that data on a very regular basis to try and influence the way that the company works. The other thing there is important that you have training for those leaders in the business, so they're building up the empathy, they build up that understanding, and there are a lot of companies doing this now. This is a very, very busy space. There's some really interesting companies doing it, like big corporates like L'Oreal, kind of the makeup brand. They're very good at mental health. Unilever do a lot of work around this as well, and they have big teams that help the company in terms of these things. So they have an intranet where they'll post up articles, and they'll do a lot of the work where they're going, this is our member of staff and they live with this issue, and again they're trying to normalise those things within the business. So in the corporate world, I think those things are changing. I think there's certain industries where it's still incredibly macho, where it's more difficult to do that. Again, I'll talk about finance. That's an industry, and other kind of manufacturing industries as well, because they're the province of men who don't talk about these things, all that kind of stuff. So they're harder to change. But the makeup of boardrooms is changing. So key to this is getting more diversity into the boardroom as well. So there's a thing in the UK where they've reached a target. They're aiming for a 50-50 split of male-female and general diversity set in boards, and that's incredibly important because if you don't have that mix of cultures and genders and sexualities sat at the highest level of businesses, then you're going to go down the route of making it just the way it has been previously. So getting the culture right is the biggest sea change, I think, for businesses now, because that's the only way that we can really be better with what's going on in the world and what's happening.
And some things you can start looking out for are, is this person sitting next to you in a cubicle or whatever, how are they coming into work and not socializing with you as much?
Yeah.
Did they used to used to drink water, and now they're like, drinking coffee and ready for, drink after work, or
there's these little signs that you see, and all it takes is, are you okay?
Mm-hmm.
That thing. Would you want to just go for a coffee? Go for a talk? Mm-hmm. Because one of the things is just the smallest of gestures can mean the biggest.
Yeah, and if they say they're okay, challenge them a little bit. You could even say, I've just seen, that you seem a little more tired, or I've noticed that we haven't been talking as much. Question that, because a lot of people say, I'm good, I'm fine, whatever.
Yeah, this is why the idea of mental health first aid is really good, because it teaches you how to have those conversations.
I need to look into that.
Yeah, it's a movement that's kind of happening around the world now much more, and I've been trained in it relatively recently, and I was trained by someone who's in the army. Right, and that's where they do it in the army in the UK.
Okay.
So they come from that world, which is great, because if you think about PTSD and people who've been on tour in theatres of war and things like that, these are the people who need that help. Right?
Yes, absolutely.
And they're bringing those kind of same practices out into the world of the civilians. So learning to kind of spot those things and being empathetic to the people that you work with or you live with. Even the kind of people like your parents, like recognizing in the older generation, life's changing.
Yeah.
What I noticed in the younger generation is with what's going on in Ukraine right now, what's going on with climate change, genuine deep anxiety about those things.
Yes.
Right. And, I'm growing up in the 80s and being worried about the Cold War, but it all kind of felt a little bit removed. It didn't really feel that real. But for the kids now, and for the way that news is reported, and the way that news cycles work,
and social media,
and you were mentioning about TikTok and things like that, their access to those things doesn't come through much of a filter anymore. It is there, and it is repeated, and people are doom scrolling or going onto Twitter and all these type of things, and the algorithms are designed to deliver us more and more of this. So it's really, really hard. This is why anxiety peaks.
Oh, absolutely. I was slow to get into the social media world, and now I need to for business. And so I'm not going to say which one, but one of them I just signed up for, and all of a sudden it is pictures of women basically exposing themselves or doing dances that I don't care to see.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this is the reason I don't want to get on this. Like, what if my children had my phone and saw that?
Yeah.
And so just to think about what they see, and then along with media and news, and so many, I feel like right now, and it just seems like we're so far off the mark that it's almost like we're hearing from high schoolers that are in this little petty competition, around the news. And I can't watch it anymore. I try to just find real, just facts if I can.
Yeah, and one of the things I stopped my social media before Christmas because it was too much. Very similar thing. One of the things that I thought was really interesting, and one of the things I'm trying to do, is look at things from different perspectives. And this is really important to get a balance. So if wherever your politics lie, I think it's incumbent upon people now to actually listen to whatever the other side is. So if you're left-leaning or right-leaning, to actually kind of listen to those what they're saying, and listen to what your tribe is saying. Because the trouble is, news and social media becomes incredibly polarized. So what happens is you enter into an echo chamber of people who think the same as you, and they're not challenging that. And this is one of the issues that causes a lot of problems now, in regards to some of these kind of platforms as well, especially with a lot of women as well, and having 2 daughters. This is an important thing for me as well. Things like beauty ideals and the kind of this race for this kind of some kind of perfection or trend, micro trend that happens, and the loss of individuality because of that. And the algorithms are designed to do this. They're designed to give you that little dopamine hit into your brain because you've got a like or you've seen something. Like when I was on some of the social media, the things that were delivered to me, I got bodybuilding stuff. Like, I'm not interested in that at all. Why would I? But because I'm male, of a certain age, a certain social economic kind of like background. That's what the algorithm's thinking. So I'm seeing all these kind of chiseled guys, lifting all the weights and having all the protein, and all this. I'm like, no, it's completely wrong. But for someone who's not like me, who's someone more vulnerable to that, who thinks they need to be like that, this is a traumatic thing. And it changes the stereotypes, it changes the way that they feel, it makes them feel inadequate, it leads to isolation, it leads to loneliness.
Yeah, I almost wish they would put up like a questionnaire of what you're interested in.
Yeah.
And maybe some of them do or some don't. I don't even remember.
Facebook used to back in the day when it started. Yeah.
Instead of just exposing people to things that could take them to a place where it's causing them to have more anxiety.
Yep.
It's causing them to feel depressed because they don't look a certain way and because they're not of that image. But, it's, I don't know. It's hard to pinpoint. And what I do understand and what I'm trying to do is, like, I've had so many people say, what you're trying to put out there is for good, and social media is not going anywhere. So put it out there.
Yeah.
And, so that's what I'm trying to do. But I have a lot
I think
of
that's a good thing. I think trying to kind of like be an authentic voice around mental health and increasing its normalcy and talking, the conversation and facilitating those conversations is a great thing. And it makes it normal again, and people just like, right, okay, this is fine to talk about. This is okay.
And that's why I want these to always feel like it's not an interview. It's like a conversation, because you can just talk about mental health.
Yeah.
You could just ask one, question and go into just talk about it with your friends. And I can't wait to look at that first aid. What is it? The
mental health first aid.
Mental health first aid. Yeah, because
it's a whole thing. They're really good.
I'm gonna dive deep into that for sure.
It's everybody, as we said, everyone has mental health, and everyone will go through something at some point in their lives. The statistic that everyone talks about is that 1 in 4 people every year will have a mental health problem, right? So 25% of the population will have well, that's every year.
Yeah.
Right? Now that's WHO, World Health Organization. I think that was 2018 when they did that. The pandemic's happened since then. And also, the climate has changed again. I mean, quite obviously, it's happening. And also, we've got Ukraine happening right now as well. These are globally traumatic events.
Yeah.
Right? So for me, I think that statistic has probably changed. I think with the people opening up after lockdown, I think the attitude of a lot of people is different now to talk about these things. I was hosting some events around mental health during lockdown, and where people kind of could talk to other people, because people were just in their homes, like staring at a screen, and all they had was that routine of getting up, going downstairs, or not even going downstairs, just going across the room, sitting down, opening a laptop and doing work. That is no way to live. So that was traumatic for many, many people. So now we're kind of opening up. People are starting to realise that they can have those conversations and they can be more open about those things. And I just hope that continues. It seems to be that, as you say, you're kind of slightly behind maybe in the US, but there's a snowball of that. And the more people who can talk about mental health and go, hey, I wasn't well for a bit, but I'm fine. I also had a cold and now I'm fine.
Yeah, exactly. And this is what I did. Just here's some things too to let you know if you're going through that. This is what you can do too if you're interested in it. Yeah.
There's so many services out there that help. At a civic level, at a private level, and friends, family, all of those things. There's so many support networks out there for people, but loneliness is such and kind of isolation. It's so easy to get there.
It was one of so I have major depressive disorder, generalized anxiety disorder. I don't know if I still have PTSD, but it was diagnosed about 2 years ago. And I have to say, like, loneliness was the hardest thing for me. And sometimes still is. Like, it was just talking. Luckily, I have more of a team now, but when I started this, I was alone, and I was still struggling with that loneliness.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like in your gut. It is in your soul, and it was really hard. And I just kept going. So luckily I had taken care of my mental health enough so I could keep going and working at this. But 2 years before that, I was not in a place I could have done that at all.
Yeah, I hear you on that one. So when I was here at South by Southwest in 2019, I was with people that I knew and I was friendly with, but I felt I was so alone.
Yeah.
That was the thing. There's thousands of people here in the city, and there's a lot of things going on at South by. There's a lot of parties and drinks and socializing, and I'm a quite gregarious person. But yeah, I was totally alone, and in the middle of the night, I was awake because I couldn't sleep, and I was crying, and you know, and again, as you'll know, with general anxiety disorder, it's not this single thing. It's kind of just everything kind of on top of you, and just feeling like that, and feeling by yourself the entire time. And then I'm married, and I've got a great marriage, I've got great kids, but I was separated from them by thousands of miles, right?
Yeah.
As well. So I couldn't immediately reach out and talk. But there was also at the time, because I didn't realise where I was with it, I couldn't have that conversation. I couldn't be erudite. I couldn't kind of explain why and how I was feeling like that. So that's one of the things that's really important, giving people the tools to be able to talk about it. So the language to a certain degree, but this is why things like cognitive behavioural therapy are really important, because they're techniques that allow people to be able to open up in a very easy way that doesn't require overly kind of technical diagnosis or anything like this. I mean, there's a tendency for people to diagnose. A lot of people don't want to be diagnosed. They don't want to have something named. Some people do, and they find that really helpful, because then you can say, therefore there's a thing I can solve. Some people don't want that, because they find that too much, too restrictive. And this is why you do have things like borderline disorders and things like that, because they're on the edge of something. But doing therapy and having conversations, and it can be with a therapist, but it can just be with a person, just to try and elicit those responses. And as you were saying, like just being caring for a colleague and asking, do you want to have a chat? Do you want to talk about this? If you don't, it's cool. But also making sure that you're aware that if you think someone is vulnerable, make sure you tell someone as well. That's a very important thing to do. You're not telling on them. You're not kind of, I don't know what the phrase would be in the US, but grassing them up and like, this person. It's not gossip. It's care, right? So you can do that if you're not comfortable in having those conversations, but you've noticed it. Find someone who can.
Yeah. That's friends with them, or you can talk to it. Yeah.
There's a tangent there you could take to help that person, because there's a lot of people don't want to talk about these things.
Right. And another thing too about going back on loneliness is that I would tell my friends this, and they're like, "But you have so much to be grateful for. Like, look at where you live and look at your kids." And I'm like, "I know that.
Yeah.
I know. I do a gratitude list every day. It doesn't take away that feeling that's in your body. It can take over. So I just want people to know that too. Like, if you're experiencing these feelings and you're hearing kind of like pull up your bootstraps, or you should be grateful for that, or whatever, it's like you don't have to buy into that. It's okay not to be okay, which is, I hear a lot of people say that out there. And it's okay to have your feelings and to work through them. And it's like, if you're wounded, you bandage yourself up, you get medicine. This is times when sometimes we're wounded. And just, got to do the proper, steps in order just to heal that wound, and then, find ways of coping with it.
People, I do this all the time, but when I'm not feeling mentally brilliant, I do the same thing to myself. You should be fine. Everything's actually okay. And I know I've got kind of half my brain's going, no, you need to take care of yourself. And the other part of my brain, which is kind of my previous personality, as it were, kind of going, no, you're fine. Everything's good. You should be doing this thing and presenting. But so I think personally, I have a kind of real internal conflict on those things, where both sides are kind of relatively rational and kind of have an argument about it.
I know what you're talking about.
Because you do that thing where you internalize the idea of well, I've got enough money, I have a nice house, I've got great kids, and I can pay for food, I can go on holidays, all that stuff is great, but I'm still feeling absolutely terrible. Why is that? Is that okay? But the other thing to realise as well is that it might not be a trigger. It might just literally be you're feeling that way at that time, and there's nothing particular that's actually caused it.
Yeah.
Because that's certain for me.
Yeah.
Sometimes I will wake up in a certain state of mind, and that might be a subconscious thing, I process that in my sleep, and I just woke up in a certain way, and I'm not feeling great. Or I wake up with anxiety response where I feel my heart going when I wake up in the morning, and I'll go, I've got no idea why I feel like this, but I feel like this.
And then when you have more compassion towards yourself and
Yeah.
accept it, I feel like it goes away much faster.
Yeah.
Anytime
I agree with that.
I really try to do that every single time now.
Yeah.
And not let my mind go to here or there, and I just say, you know what? Hey, you're okay. Just like you would tell your kids.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm here for you.
Yeah.
You're okay.
Sometimes you just have to write it out as well, because it can last days.
It can.
So the day, there's, like I was saying, so before I came here, I was getting wound up about coming here, about the just remembering where I was mentally here 3 years ago. And so I wasn't sleeping, and I knew what was happening. I was very conscious of the fact that I was going through a depressive kind of episode, an anxious episode. And the only way it was relieved was the fact that I actually made it to the airport and got here.
Yeah.
And when I was here, I was like, and that's what lifted the problem.
Yeah.
The stimulus kind of went away at that point, but it's I wouldn't have been able to do anything about it.
So I went through something similar, and it's not because I had a South by only time I've ever come to South by before this, it was like with my kids walking around the streets.
Yeah.
So never done it for work. But it was the fear of the unknown. What is it going to look like? What do I do?
Yeah.
I've always interviewed or told people have told their stories who I know. And this is the first time I'm talking to people who I don't know.
Yeah.
How's that going to go?
Yeah.
I had a colleague come into town, and they stayed with me. And, I'm like, I got to make sure everything's, I just was like so much unknown that it threw me into like last Wednesday. A total panic, crying, like heavy crying. And then I woke up the next day, and I'm like, ice patches on me. I had to do stories, because I was just like, but I couldn't get myself out of it. And then I did try to show compassion on myself, because in my mind I was like, I really don't want to look like I've been crying all night on these stories. But it was vain, I know. It's true.
Yeah, but I think that's absolutely fine. I think that's another thing, is like kind of like breaking away from the idea of vanity as well, and going, if looking in a certain way makes you feel better, then that's great, right? And certainly kind of something I know about myself is like, the more healthy I am, the better I feel I look, and that actually has a feedback loop for myself, and I feel better about that as well.
Yeah.
So those things are really, really important, and recognizing that. But that thing about kind of like being anxious about something you can't control, like I couldn't, I was, the flight and everything was kind of rolling towards me, and that's what was making me worried. But it was going to happen. And it's out of my control. But I knew what was happening. But I can't get out of it. Yeah. But then you kind of then it kind of
it does.
lifts and you can go.
Yeah. Because it's like, okay, I got to do what I got to do now, and it's kind of works itself out.
But sometimes you just have to be there and kind of accept it.
Right.
But it's okay to kind of retreat as well. I think that's absolutely fine too.
Yeah.
I've definitely done that.
Well,
before.
good. Okay. Before, I want to ask you what your wellness tips are, what you do, but I'd love to touch on real quickly, like, how are you and your family? You said that you're more northern England.
Yeah.
With the war and everything that's going on.
Yeah.
Is it?
So, again, it's for myself, I found it incredibly anxiety inducing. Not only for me, but for my family and for my kids. thinking about what's happening in Ukraine, why it's happening, and doesn't seem to be a very good reason for it. So that logic of, you know, why someone would want to invade, and you know, I understand the geopolitics of the situation, you know, kind of like, you know, NATO versus kind of Russia and how that's operating, but there's no reason to do what Putin did. Right? It is imperialism. It's someone invading another country to nominally protect Russian-speaking people. It's ridiculous. And you know, I'm wearing this little kind of heart here about Ukraine, and the thing is, it kind of is adding to kind of like the general kind of like trauma and worry about what's going on in the world right now, and the feeling like people like us, we can't control these things, and you know, personally, what we've done at home, as like I said, my eldest daughter is running a fundraiser at school about creating Ukraine ribbons and selling them to her friends. There's a scheme that's happening for Ukrainian refugees in the UK. So we've opened up our house. We've got, you know, spare rooms, and you know, we've signed up. So, you know, we might get a Ukrainian refugee or family or individual come stay with us, and they've said in the UK it could be 6 months minimum or longer, which is absolutely fine to do that. So, you know, whatever you can do. Something that someone said to me while I was here was really important. It's like, you're doing this for the Ukrainians. You're doing this for a group of kind of white Europeans, basically. Why didn't you do this with Syria? Right? There's been a war going on there for a long time now. And I was kind of floored by that. I was like, you know what? You're absolutely right. One of the reasons why this has got struck so hard, especially for Europeans and around the world as well, is that it's a bunch of white people it's happening to. Right? And that's one of the things that's kind of gone, yeah, you're right. It is bad and it's terrible, but this isn't just happening in Ukraine. It's South Sudan or wherever. You know, there's been a war in Syria for, was it 18 years? I don't know. But it just, those things.
Makes you think.
It really kind of makes you go, oh, hang on a second, this isn't right. So I think for me, Ukraine is a flashpoint. I mean, there's talk of they've found some place to negotiate today, it seems, in terms of having a peace agreement, but I can't see it happening, particularly because of how atrocious it's been, and that word, atrocity, it's, you know, Russia has kind of pulled its full kind of weight against this. But that said, the world seems to be coming together. South Southwest are doing some good stuff. They're trying to raise money, raise awareness about what's going on and how it happens. There was a protest at the Capitol this week as well, I saw, just up here on Congress. So I think for me, it's just an indictment of where humanity is right now with this.
Yeah.
And if we can get a handle on this, and what I'm kind of hopeful of is that if humanity can realize that these things shouldn't happen, and shouldn't ever happen, we will genuinely start to stop them and actually do something about it. And the totalitarian kind of populist movement, which we've had in lots of countries, so Brazil, here, UK, they will move on and we'll mature from that. And we'll start to also get a handle on what's happening with the environment as well, and start to really think about how we're going to solve that problem, with, you know, carbon sequestering and all those different kind of things to try and kind of stop the problem. I mean, I was talking to a friend of mine last night, who's moved here from California, and I hear that like, you know, there's a lot of people doing that. But one of the reasons why she said she moved was the general feeling what's happening in California right now was the breakdown of law and order during COVID, right? And also the fact that there's a massive water shortage. The environmental impact of climate change is real and it's happening, and it's causing migration in this country right now. And so for me, it's like it's key that the leadership that we have get a grip on this and deal something with it. But I think there's a much more power coming from people that are aware, people know what's going on and can have those conversations and can start to exercise their democratic power to try and kind of change those things. And that's what I kind of hope happens.
Yeah.
Voter disenfranchisement is a whole different thing, but
Yeah.
you know, if we can try to kind of move
Yeah.
much more quickly towards those more positive ways of viewing other people in the world, that would really help.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Absolutely.
How about yourself with Ukraine?
You know, I've been watching it on the news and trying to see like what's the best organization to donate to. So maybe you could we can talk about that, or you can give me some recommendations. And then I'm trying to figure out a way. You know, I'm wondering is like the BBC or what kind of news, because I've kind of had my kids stay out of the news, but we do try to touch on some topics because there's a news for kids or whatever.
Yeah.
That I feel like I want them to know more about this than just news for kids. And so I've been trying to figure out a way to find that certain balance of what's a good news station. But and so we can talk about it within the home. I feel like whenever you have these kind of conversations with your kids and you're honest about it, and you know, you come together and I want to talk to them, like, how do we decide it as a family? What's the best place for us to donate money? And I want them to include some of theirs. That's kind of what, that's where I've started.
Well, similar with our kids. So my eldest daughter, Elodie, is 10 years old, and she reads a magazine, like a news magazine for kids. But it's really great, and it gives a balanced view of what's going on, but talks about it from kids' perspectives. What are the kids feeling out there? What's happening to them? And I think that perspective was really interesting. So trying to like explain geopolitics to a kid might not really work, but explaining the fact that people are being violent and these kids have to leave their home, trying to build empathy with the kid to understand like why that would happen, how would they feel if they had to get in the car and drive 3,000 miles or whatever it is across many countries.
We're here like bombing
to escape.
And guns and not too far off, you know?
Yeah. I mean, the trauma of war and hearing, you know, there was a nursery that got hit, you know, things like this, and these are really awful stories, but trying to kind of frame it for a kid in such a way that they understand why and what's happening, but not so it's so traumatic for them. And but it's really important that kids get that as at an early age, I think.
Yeah. So with, you know, we have mental health without, you know, the pandemic and war, and then people who are going through maybe going through a little bit more because of the pandemic and the war. Are there any, you know, just tips or tools that you use in order to work with your anxiety and that you could share with our audience?
The thing for me is giving myself a break. Is kind of realizing that I don't have to be performing all the time. I don't have to be busy all the time. I can have downtime. I can have, and I don't just mean kind of sitting in front of the TV and just slobbing out. There are things that I do, particularly around exercise, which are really important. So I have a dog and I walk for miles. I live in a beautiful place with valleys and woods and all this kind of thing. That is an incredible part. One of the things about fitness and exercise is that has a very high index. If you go and do exercise, it will help your mental health. So the first thing they prescribe in the UK is if you've got mental health problems, go out and do some exercise because it helps. Right. So it's not about it's not medicine or therapy. It's exercise because it genuinely helps. For many reasons. So for me, I make sure I do exercise. I make sure I can go out with the dog every day. I make sure I get fresh air. I make sure that I've got a bit of silence in my time as well. So I don't have my headphones. I don't have my phone turned on. And I have that time just to let my mind drift. So I don't have to think about anything. And I can just concentrate on, well, not even concentrate, but just walk. Right. That's actually really important for me to be able to settle my brain, because with the general anxiety disorder, there's a thing called brain chatter, where you just things are moving really fast in your brain. You, like say, the switching channels thing. So give myself the opportunity to just for my brain just to stop and to slow down, and the rhythm of walking, the act of doing it, that's what helps me. I think definitely giving up social media was a really good thing for me. The trickiness there is that I've lost something, which is a connection with friends. So I have to do that in a different way. Especially friends who don't live near me, I have to kind of compensate for that in a different way now. But the digital detox will really, really work for me. It's not right for everybody, at all, and some people really enjoy it and get a lot out of it, and they have their careers on there and their lives on there. But for me, it became too much, and it distracted me from the moment, being present, especially with my family as well. There's nothing worse than kind of, a parent just kind of scrolling on their phone, their kids kind of sat bored there, and things like that. And it's not right. You need to be engaging and working with your kids. So my advice is, if you can and if you feel right, try and cut down or remove social media, or at least kind of cull the things, the stresses that sit within that. So reduce the things that you see. Spend less time doing it. There's tools to do that as well. Don't spend 5 hours, spend half an hour, for instance.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And two, I think it's important, just like I said, I took social media out, but for me there was a time, and I've always been, movement's very important, like walking or whatever. But when I was in the depths of it, that was really hard for me to do.
Oh, yeah.
And so, and my mind is usually like, it's either 3 miles or nothing. And I started to get back into walking and just working out, just telling myself, just do 5 minutes,
Like cleaning the house.
Yeah. Or
Actually.
like social media, like you're saying, it just is like, just take small steps, because I think that also leads to a way of life that it'll be more over the long term. Like it's a lifestyle. It's not just, and if you can do it in a way that just is small and manageable, if you're not able to do it, you'll get there.
Yeah. It's crucial as well not to think about it in terms of absolutes, in terms of, if I don't do this, it won't happen.
Yeah.
Some days you will not want to go for a walk, or some days you will, and some days, whatever. So I think if you set yourself too high a standard with those things, it can be counterproductive.
Yeah.
So for me, it's like, I give myself leeway with those things. Like going to the gym, I go to the gym, but I'm not going to kind of like, I'm going to go 3 times a week. It's like, no, I've got to fit it around the things that I need to do. I've got, all these other things happening. And I'm going to allow myself that flexibility as well. So I think it's too easy for people as well, especially in a medicalized model of mental health, to think that I need to do these things to be better and for it to be a quick fix. Because the thing about mental health, it's not like a broken bone, but it's fit. Maybe the analogy just stands. Once you've broken a bone, once it's healed, it's still going to be weak, and it could break again. There's the same thing with mental health. It's like you will get better, but you could tip over again. So you've got to keep looking after yourself. You've got to kind of maintain that, but you shouldn't set yourself unrealistic goals for trying to do that.
Right. Yeah. No, absolutely. Adam, I want to thank you again for joining us.
Thank you.
It's been such a pleasure. I want to thank you for joining us here at Speak as One. You can watch Adam and many other videos at speakasone.com, or you can go to our YouTube channel and subscribe at Speak as One. Please like and share with your friends, and we'll see you next time.